Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for playing, and this concludes our service.